Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today in my capacity as CEO of NordSpace, a 100% Canadian-owned company dedicated for years to providing made-in-Canada sovereign space launch capability with our manufacturing facility located in Markham, Ontario, and spaceport located in Newfoundland and Labrador. Space is recognized in defense policy as critical to our sovereignty, our security, and our prosperity. NordSpace's mission is to help Canada translate that policy ambition into practical domestic capability. Today, we have a choice to make and a narrow window of opportunity to make it. Will Canada choose to be a participant or a leader in space? Will we choose to be buyers or builders? NordSpace builds orbital launch vehicles, a spaceport and spacecraft, designed, manufactured, and soon launched in Canada. Our focus is simple: Canadian payloads on Canadian rockets from Canadian soil to save Canadian lives on and off the battlefield while securing thousands of Canadian jobs, components, and intellectual property. This end-to-end approach is intended to complement the Government of Canada's procurement framework by strengthening the build pillar of build, partner, buy, with a truly sovereign option for assured access to orbit. For NordSpace, launch is a means to an end. Our simple, scalable, and proven architecture focuses on reliably progressing from light to medium lift vehicles and prioritizing urgent capability development over science experiments that unnecessarily delay achieving operational capabilities. From a defense perspective, assured access to space is critical. It underpins navigation, communication, surveillance, and command and control for the Canadian Armed Forces and our allies. In a crisis, we cannot assume that launch capability elsewhere in the world will be available or even prioritized for Canadian needs. Indeed, Canada and Canadian taxpayers have experienced this reality in recent times with RADARSAT-2, and history will repeat itself. A sovereign launch capability helps ensure that when a satellite must be deployed or replenished quickly, Canada has responsive options at home. If it does not, bluntly, foreign nations are making national security decisions for Canada. Economically, a domestic launch capability supports high-quality jobs in engineering, manufacturing, and advanced technologies. It draws on strengths in aerospace and automotive, aluminum, and critical minerals, generates significant economic activity and over 1,000 permanent jobs over the coming decade alone. It also keeps intellectual property in Canada, allowing us to innovate quickly in response to evolving CAF requirements while exporting competitive solutions to our allies. NordSpace is working relentlessly to provide sovereign space solutions through our launch vehicle and our space systems division to build a self-sustaining launch cadence. We are working hard to demonstrate suborbital launch in the coming weeks, powered by our in-house designed, manufactured, and tested patent-pending Hadfield rocket engines, followed by orbital launch in 2028. Our satellite, Terra Nova, is headed to orbit later this year to demonstrate real-time AI-driven space domain awareness and wildfire monitoring. And we have secured a ride to the moon for Canada's first lunar rover, Terry, named after Terry Fox, on an Artemis mission as early as next year. These small, privately funded internal Pathfinder missions are carefully planned and executed today to scale to and support a viable and commercially sustainable launch program for tomorrow, one that does not perpetually rely on the D&D and government grants and contracts to thrive and is resilient against all odds so that we do not end up with another Avro Arrow moment. Building real businesses is indeed the reason why companies such as SpaceX and New Zealand's Rocket Lab have thrived, not just survived, and continue to provide resilient, defense-specific launch, hypersonic, surveillance, and communication capabilities to defend their nations. Let me be clear, NordSpace is here to win in Canada and win on the world stage, and to establish a new Canadian prime born from this bold defense industrial strategy. We have been encouraged by recent federal initiatives from Launch the North to the Canadian Space Launch Act. These measures send a strong signal to industry and investors that Canada is in fact serious. Already, NordSpace is increasing the size of our manufacturing facility in Markham to tenfold to support 235 employees and, as we speak, expanding our spaceport in Newfoundland. We are forging critical partnerships across Canada, including launch services agreements, most recently, just last week, with Alberta-based Wyvern Space to demonstrate state-of-the-art deployable optics for Canada, potentially the first ever fully sovereign Canadian space mission upon launch with NordSpace. Finally, space is a powerful source of national unity and inspiration. As Minister Champagne recently noted, Canadian astronaut Colonel Hansen's journey around the moon reminded us that the sky is no longer the limit. In closing, NordSpace has three key brief recommendations. First, we recommend the Government of Canada ensure Transport Canada has the resources it needs to develop the regulatory regime envisioned by the Canadian Space Launch Act, and the government consider Canada's own dedicated space command. We further recommend the government continue to invest in sovereign launch over the long term on the higher end of light lift and extending to medium and heavy lift alongside a spaceport that genuinely can support these scaled capabilities. Finally, NordSpace would like to work with the government under the Defense Industrial Strategy, specifically to develop a framework for ensuring that the Government of Canada prioritizes building truly sovereign space launch solutions over buying foreign ones. As B.Jen Horner, commander of the 3 Canadian Space Division, has said, from the Arctic to cislunar space, Canada's strategic environment is expanding, and so must our ambition. Thank you, and I look very forward to your questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Goel, as a newer company entering the space sector, the Defense Industrial Strategy places a strong emphasis on innovation. What does successful support for emerging companies look like in practice?
Well, we have a pretty strong opinion when it comes to innovation, and innovation should be applied in the right domains, perhaps where operational capability is not of significant urgency, or we are actually exploring a scientific question that humans are not at the forefront of. Launch has been a capability that humans have been capable of for decades now. The fact that Canada has not developed it does not mean that the rest of the world has not. Our priority is to get Canadian assets into space as quickly as possible. There are lives on the line, there's the economy on the line, and if there's an innovative route that makes that more feasible and quicker to attain, then we will certainly take it. But there is not. It's rocket science for a reason. The margins are extremely thin, and we have a job to do. So there's a room and time for innovation. And certainly every aspect, it is quite literally rocket science, from 3D printing our engines to robotic manufacturing of our composite pressure vessels. We've been doing this for many years now, and there's innovation at every step. We choose to apply it to the manufacturing and to the unit economics, but not to the fundamental first principles that actually govern the rocket science behind our capability. So I think we have to be very measured in how we apply innovation. And in our case, it's all about first principles and getting that capability up and in orbit as quickly as possible.
And where do you see smaller companies having the greatest opportunity to contribute to Canada's defense and security objectives?
Well, we have the ability to take on the type of risk that larger companies simply do not. Our team, in our personal experience, in my personal experience, we work weekdays and weeknights, weekends, skip anniversaries and birthdays. This is something that's very tough in large companies, but this is the type of commitment that's required, and that has been required by every company. We talk about companies like SpaceX. They started in a very similar capacity in a similar way, where they had people sleeping in tents on an island in the middle of the Pacific to launch the Falcon 1 rocket in 2008. We look at the Falcon 9 and say, yes, we want to build medium lift for Canada, but the reality is that so much came before that point to get SpaceX to the point that it is now to be $1 trillion IPO. We talk about the Falcon 9 rocket, for example. That rocket, 70% of that rocket launches Starlink satellites. Their internal cost to launch Starlink is $18 million, but they charge customers like us and the rest of the world $75 million. Starlink runs 66% of SpaceX's actual economics. We think of them as a rocket company, but they're a space telecommunications company and they're a space systems company. So you have to be very realistic about the type of capability that we're developing, and small companies are the ones that can take on the risk and build up to a point where we can reach that level.
Wow, thank you.
I think that we all know that given Canada's history towards Indigenous peoples, when we've tended to say that we have an underrepresentation in this field of Indigenous peoples, of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. And I wonder if France and Mike, if you can respond to this question, what does the federal government need to do to help increase and have sustained engagement of Indigenous peoples in this field?
I'd like to just comment on, some very tangible examples of what we can do at the SME level as well. Two examples come to mind. One, just last week, we announced an $8 million project in advanced manufacturing, a consortium led by NordSpace and NGen support. And one of the key contributors is Bear Paw Production in Ontario, where they're developing specialized metal superalloy powders that go into our 3D printers that develop our rocket engines. And we've been very intentional about pursuing that. It also comes down, as mentioned, mentioned, towards the talent in the workforce. We're very proud of our lead structures engineer who worked at SpaceX and worked on the Raptor engines and is of Indigenous origin from Alberta, and came back to Canada because he saw that we are developing rockets here in Canada and could leave the United States and come back home. And we're constantly trying to develop that sort of talent here in Canada. It's abundant. And again, we just have to be intentional about it.